Diaz versus Masvidal. What happened and where do we go from here, right? I mean, those are always the two things. There's really nothing else that matters. But where we go from here is the key to all of this, because Nate said that his ultimate goal is not going back to the UFC. He has not said, I want to be in the UFC or I want to go back in about 4 years. And I do want you to notice that, particularly if you're a Diaz fan. If you're a Diaz fan and supporter, he has not said anything about himself and the UFC where he does not add to win the world championship. And young Nate Diaz actually didn't. I don't remember a time, as a matter of fact. It's a newer thing. And it could possibly just be a matter of speaking. It could be. But I don't think so. I think Nate, somewhere just within himself, found the importance of saying it. He found the importance of taking the risk or having people tell you can't do that, or having other people tell you, yeah, right on, right? Guys like me, yeah, right on, let's go win that championship. And I think that came towards the backside of his career where he's realizing, hey, I got in this when I was 19. I got this when I was 20. I did the ultimate. I've done absolutely everything. However, I got less fights less than I've already had, right? That's how I'll put it. I don't like the term backside of the career, but you know. You know when it's not just, I'm going to be doing this for forever in the foreseeable future. You know when it's one day at a time, one fight at a time. And I feel like there was something about that created an urgency. And within that urgency, it really forced Nate into a spot that he had never been in, which is, what is it I want to do? You know, for a very meaningful period of time, Nate, who let us all in on this, right? Like, this isn't inside info I'm giving you. He let us all in on, I went out of my contract. But the next step wasn't fully formed. Like, why? That part wasn't fully formed. And he worked like hell. And he took risks and he did things other guys weren't willing to do to achieve that goal. That was a goal of his, and he worked just as hard to get out of that contract, who, by the way, he did it unlike anybody else. First off, he publicly said it. He had his last fight. Everybody knew it was, and they still featured him. You can't give me one example where that's ever happened. I mean, just that. You cannot give me one example. And whether that ended up being Tony Ferguson or not, that is not the fight that Nate agreed to. That is not the fight that Nate trained for. Contrary to the way you may remember it, Nate Diaz never trained to fight Tony Ferguson. He trained and agreed to fight Khamzat Chimaev and ended up fighting Tony Ferguson. I'm just sharing with you that when Nate completed that and he took that microphone after telling everybody for years that this is what he wanted out of that contract, he was extremely respectful, and people thought that microphone was going to be a pipe bomb, and it was not. In fact, when that reality had come, and that final bell, right, where the referee steps in, when that final moment came, it is now free. And in that moment, he said, I do want to go box. He talked about maybe he was getting his own thing going. They were going to do boxing and kickboxing and grappling. Remember, they started this thing, but we were given tons of information, and then goes right into the Jake Paul, which took on a life of its own. And while he was going through that process, and it was everything that he wanted it to be, like Nate lived the dream. You know, these other guys that I want to go to boxing because they hear that there's money, and what they find out is that first off, there's not, at least not for them. And it's a very dirty business, and it's very unorganized, right? They kind of find out this isn't what I thought. Well, but not all of them. Conor McGregor had a great experience, just for example. Well, so did Nate. Nate had an awesome experience, and he got a main event, and he got a feature, and he goes to Dallas, and it's a sold-out, man. All of us, we all go there, we're supporting him. I mean, it was everything that he wanted it to be, and then he realized he missed home. And he has said right there that this, and working on this, and mastering, and all the things that go in are a preparation It wasn't just to go to the UFC. It was to win the world championship. It was cool, man. It was cool when he said it. I loved it. He wasn't talking about winning world championships when he was in there with Leon, just for example. It was a newer thing where he started to realize, hey, I'm fighting all these guys. I might as well beat these guys. Oh, by the way, if I'm fighting all world champions and the best guys out, I might as well fight the guy that's the current world champion, beat him and take the belt. Like, it was just cool. I was into it. So he goes out and he gets to jump on Masvidal and he says it again. UFC World Championship says Leon's name. He already fought him once. You can't tell me Nate's not good enough to fight. He already fought him once. So, but how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? If we're going to go off precedence, how are we going to get a 39-year-old a new fresh contract? That's very different than you saying, hey, Chael, there's some 39-year-olds to fight. Now, I understand that are already under contract. We're now talking about getting a new contract, which is it's just a whole nother game. That's all I'm suggesting for you. It's a whole nother thing. Now, if we get that done, if we can get through that, you could main event him right now. He main evented Saturday, sold 18,000 tickets to boxing, which he's only done one other time. And these weren't boxing fans. These weren't people that wanted to come and see Nate box. These are Nate fans, and they wanted to come and see Nate. You could put on the back end of that whatever you wanted. It could be a hangout. It could be a sit-down. It could have been a one-man show. Ariel Helwani. They were coming to see Nate. And I'm reminding you of that because that's unique. And when you have somebody that's unique, that's built and or created, and they've got themselves into this spot, they deserve to be treated uniquely. They've earned that. So I'm telling you, before anybody comes in the second floor of the UFC and just say, hey, look, we just don't do 39-year-olds. And that is going to be their very first response. Like, it wouldn't matter who you are offering them. We just don't, well, as a policy in a broad stroke, I hear you on that. But we have a unique 39-year-old who just beat your BMF champion in a sold-out venue with 18,000 plus. I mean, it's different. Can we just agree that it's different? So I don't know where that goes, and I don't know where that future goes, but I do know that Nate's attitude is different. And if you went and watched this fight, this is quite possibly the best Nate's looked. And if you're going to disagree with that, go ahead, but you're going to have to go back a long time. Here, let me just give you one example. You always hear about the cardio of the Diaz boys. You always hear about this, and Nick's the one that started that because Nick started doing these triathlons, and he started really making it known. And he was even into nutrition, and like soda pop was the worst thing in the world. And he kind of got some of these ideas. But then he went out and he was just breaking guys in fights. He was putting a pressure on them. He was breaking them. But because this stigma started with Nick, it then went to Nate. And you find out, well, little brother's doing the same thing. Nick's triathlons got advertised, but Nate's entering these same things. And she starts to get known for this cardio. And it was very accurate. If you wanted to go back and you want to look at Nate fights, I'll challenge you to tell me a fifth round that you've ever seen him lose. And the fifth round could be a third round, right? I'm talking about the last round of a fight. Go back and just tell me one that he lost. You're going to have a really hard time. But you know what you're going to have just a hard time as? Telling me a first round that he won. And it could be against anybody, including Jorge Masvidal the first time they fought. Nate, for as hard as he will finish, is a oddly slow start. Like, it's you look and go, what's the deal? Are you not warmed up yet? Like, in the back, do we need to get you on some wind sprint? Like, do we need to get this going? Or are you feeling a guy out? Maybe it's like Alex Pierre, where he needs that urgency. He needs to be a little bit behind. I'm only sharing for you. That is an accurate history of Nate, that he will finish harder than he starts. Not Saturday. I couldn't believe it. When Nate came out and walked Jorge Masvidal down, walked him down, put a pressure on him, and put those... I remember I'm turning to Steve, Brady's dad. I'm literally turning going, I have never seen him fight with this kind of aggression. Not in the first round. And it's a significant difference. And you can't do that in a 30-minute atmosphere. You can't do that in a town-round fight of which you've never been in. You can't do that against a guy who already beat you. You can't do that unless you are truly driven and you paid a price in training. And Nate never spoke about that. He never said anything was harder. He never said anything was different. He never said he was more focused. He did say that the moment he was done with Jorge Masvidal, he wanted a rematch. He did say that, but is that a selling feature? Is that something you say before the fight? Because that would make sense. Is that something you want to believe to be true? It's very different. Like you can't cause motivation. You just can't. That's why you have to run on discipline. But every now and then you get it, right? Every now and then and boy, it looked like Nate was motivated. I have never seen him come out. I'm literally trying to think if that's like when I saw him fight when he was 20 or when he was 21. Have I ever seen him come out like that in the first round? And then he held it in round 2 and he held it in round 3. It was such a great fight. And if I'm being at all reasonable or fair, it was a great fight because Jorge Masvidal showed up and dug in. Jorge Masvidal had some stuff going on I couldn't explain. I hope he does an interview and tell, but like he was out southpaw. I don't know why. Sean O'Malley's calling the fight and Sean notices it right away, but then Sean even says he won't be doing this for long. Like for whatever he's testing out as southpaw, you know that he's going to switch back. They all do. Of course he's going to switch back. He didn't. And I don't know why. Because it didn't look like there was an injury. As a matter of fact, I don't know of like a common injury where when that happens, you just switch to southpaw. In an MMA situation, you'll see guys change their stance because their front leg gets taken out with kicks. There is a time, but this is different. And he looked comfortable. And George was getting a massive amount of power with his lead shot to the body. Like he knew what he was doing from southpaw. It was great. George looked great. That's my point. As far as whatever you call this, influencer boxing, whatever you call that, whatever that is, where you get two famous guys together and you have a box, whatever that is the best boxing match I've ever seen. That is one of, and just boxing as a whole, amateur, pro, heavyweight, stars, women, in any way you want to do it, that is one of the best boxing matches I've ever seen. And that would not be true had Jorge Masvidal not showed up and fought to the bitter end, trying to win. I wouldn't take, even in times I'm upset with Masvidal, his grit and heart away. It would not be true, and I would not attempt to take it from him. But I don't know if I have ever seen him fight with more grit. When I tell you that Nate's never done 10 rounds before, neither's George. It's an incredibly difficult thing to do, and it doesn't matter your level of conditioning. You got to know when to use it. And George didn't. George used it too early. He had to bite down, dig down, and show who he was to try to win that fight to the bitter end through the 10th round. Those boys, they get a lot of credit.